Tulsa, Oklahoma had the wealthiest black neighborhood in America, doctors, lawyers, millionaires living on paved streets with electricity and running water. 18 hours later, it's gone. Burned to the ground. Bombed from airplanes. 300+ people dead. And for 80 years, America pretended it never happened. And Tulsa's Greenwood District isn't just a black neighborhood, it's a phenomenon, a place that white America didn't think could exist because the dominant narrative says black people can't build wealth or create thriving communities without white guidance. But here in Greenwood there are black-owned grocery stores and hotels and newspapers and movie theaters and a hospital and churches and schools. And the main street, Greenwood Avenue, is so prosperous that Booker T. Washington called it Negro Wall Street, which later becomes Black Wall Street, because there's real money here, generational wealth being built, black doctors treating black patients in black-owned clinics, black lawyers arguing cases in front of white judges and winning, black entrepreneurs doing so well that white business owners in downtown Tulsa are getting nervous about the competition. This success didn't happen by accident. It happened because Oklahoma's early oil boom created opportunities and because Greenwood's residents worked brutally hard and invested in their community and supported each other's businesses with a discipline that created a closed economic loop where black dollars circulated multiple times before leaving the neighborhood, and it happened because despite Oklahoma's racism, and there's plenty of it, segregation is the law, the KKK is active, lynching is not uncommon, there's still more opportunity here than in the Deep South. Still enough space for ambition to become reality if you're willing to fight for every inch. 52339. Greenwood has more than 10,000 residents, over 600 businesses, and wealth that makes white Tulsa both impressed and resentful because how dare these black people have nice things, how dare they drive cars and wear fine clothes and send their children to good schools, how dare they succeed in a country that's supposed to keep them in their place, and that resentment is simmering just beneath the surface, waiting for a spark. The spark comes on May 30, 1921, when a 19-year-old black shoe shiner named Dick Rowland enters an elevator in the Drexel building in downtown Tulsa, and the white elevator operator, 17-year-old Sarah Page, screams, and Rowland runs, and what actually happened in that elevator will never be clear. Maybe Rowland tripped and grabbed her arm to steady himself. Maybe she screamed because she was startled, maybe they knew each other and had some kind of disagreement, maybe nothing happened at all, but in 1921 Oklahoma, a black man and a white woman alone in an elevator and her screaming is all the justification needed for what comes next. The next morning, the Tulsa Tribune runs a story with the headline, "Nab Negro for Attacking Girl in Elevator," and the word, attacking, does heavy lifting here because there's no evidence of an attack, no investigation, no attempt to determine what actually happened, just an accusation that fits the narrative white Tulsa wants to believe, that black men are dangerous, that black success is threatening, that something needs to be done about uppity Negroes who've forgotten their place. To the top floor of the courthouse, and by afternoon a white mob is gathering outside demanding he be handed over for lynching, and this is normal in 1921, this is how racial justice works in America, a mob forms, authorities either participate or step aside, a black man is killed, and everyone goes home feeling like order has been restored. But Greenwood doesn't accept this as normal anymore because they've built something here, they've created a community worth defending, and when word reaches Greenwood that a mob is forming to lynch Dick Rowland, a group of armed black men, many of them World War I veterans who fought for America in France and aren't interested in being terrorized at home, drives to the courthouse to offer their services protecting the prisoner. The sheriff tells them he doesn't need their help, tells them to go home, and most of them do. But the white mob sees armed black men and interprets this as an insurrection, as black people stepping out of their place, and someone fires a shot, nobody knows who, black or white, accident or intentional, and suddenly there's gunfire and chaos and several people dead, and the black men retreat to Greenwood while the white mob, now numbering in the thousands, begins organizing something that's no longer a lynching party but an invasion. Ours is not a riot, riots are spontaneous, chaotic, unorganized. This is a massacre, a military operation, a coordinated assault on an American neighborhood by thousands of white Tulsans who've deputized themselves as defenders of white supremacy and who descend on Greenwood after midnight on June 1 with guns and torches and a plan to destroy everything black people have built. They come from downtown, from white neighborhoods north of Greenwood, from surrounding towns where men pile into trucks and drive to Tulsa because they've heard black people are being put in their place and they want to participate, and they move through Greenwood systematically, block by block, setting buildings on fire and shooting anyone they see, breaking into homes where families are hiding and dragging people into the streets. And the Tulsa police don't stop them. Instead, the police deputize some of the mob members and direct traffic and arrest black people for inciting a riot, while their homes burn behind them. The black residents of Greenwood fight back. Those World War I veterans take positions and return fire, defending their families and their property with the same courage they showed in France. But they're outnumbered 50-1 and they're fighting not just a mob but the Tulsa Police Department and the National Guard, which arrives not to protect Greenwood but to disarm its defenders and round up survivors into detention centers. And by dawn on June 1st it's clear that Greenwood will not survive this night. It happened before in American history and will not happen again until Philadelphia police bomb a black neighborhood in 1985, airplanes appear over Greenwood, private planes chartered by white Tulsans, and they drop incendiary devices, homemade bombs, dynamite, turpentine balls, onto the buildings below, and Greenwood, which survived the mob and the fires, cannot survive an aerial bombardment. Survivors describe looking up and seeing planes circling overhead like vultures, describe the sound of explosions, describe buildings that weren't burning suddenly erupting in flames, describe running through streets while the sky rains fire, and this detail, the planes, the bombs, the first aerial assault on American civilians, becomes the part of the story that's hardest to believe when survivors tell it decades later. The part that historians initially dismiss as impossible or exaggerated. Until photographs surface and investigations confirm that yes, Tulsa was bombed from the air, yes, America attacked its own citizens with military tactics, yes, this really happened. By noon on June 1st, 35 blocks of Greenwood are destroyed, every business, every church, every school, the hospital, the library, 1,256 homes, and more than 300 people are dead, though the real number is probably higher because bodies are thrown into mass graves and the Arkansas River and furnaces, disposed of quickly to hide the evidence, and 10,000 people are homeless, detained in internment camps where they're held for days without charges, forced to carry green identification cards, proving they've been cleared before they're allowed to leave, and the Black Wall Street that took decades to build is erased property. They loot it first, going through homes and businesses taking jewelry and cash and anything valuable, stealing pianos and furniture and loading them into trucks, and when an elderly black couple tries to stop looters from taking their belongings, they're shot and their bodies left in the street. And this isn't an isolated incident, this is the pattern: steal everything worth stealing, burn what's left, kill anyone who resists. By the evening of June 1st, Greenwood is smoking ruins, and white Tulsa acts like nothing unusual happened, like this was justified response to black aggression, like destroying the wealthiest black neighborhood in America and killing hundreds of people and making thousands more homeless is reasonable punishment for one black man, maybe, making a white woman uncomfortable in an elevator. White Tulsa's leaders propose a solution: rebuild Greenwood as an industrial zone and relocate the black residents somewhere else, take the valuable land that black people owned and repurpose it for white benefit, but Greenwood survivors refuse to leave, refuse to let their neighborhood be erased, and they start rebuilding literally on top of the ashes, living in tents while they reconstruct homes and businesses, and within a few years Greenwood is thriving. Again, not quite as prosperous as before but still vital, still black-owned, still standing as proof that you can burn down a community but you can't burn down a people's determination to exist. But while Greenwood rebuilds physically, something else is happening that's even more insidious than the massacre itself. The story disappears, gets erased from history, removed from textbooks, not taught in Oklahoma schools, not mentioned in Tulsa, not discussed in families where grandparents survived but never told their children what they witnessed because the trauma is too deep and the threat of white violence too present and the official narrative too clear. This didn't happen, and if it did happen it wasn't that bad, and if it was that bad then black people started it, and if you keep talking about it you'll face consequences. The Tulsa Race Massacre is the most successful cover-up in American history, and generations of Americans grow up not knowing that their country once bombed a black neighborhood from the air, not knowing about Black Wall Street, not knowing that white supremacy in 1921 Oklahoma looked like organized military assault on civilians. And this erasure is intentional because if Americans knew this story they'd have to confront uncomfortable truths about what this country is capable of, about how white prosperity is sometimes built on black destruction, about how terrorism isn't just something that happens overseas but something that happened in Tulsa in 1921 and in Rosewood in 1923 and in countless other places where black success was met with white violence. The truth starts emerging in the 1990s when scholars and journalists begin investigating, when survivors, now in their 80s and 90s, finally feel safe enough to tell their stories, when excavations begin searching for mass graves, when Oklahoma is forced to acknowledge that yes, this happened, yes, it was as bad as survivors said, yes, we've been lying about it for 3/4 of a century. In 1921, Dick Rowland, the young man whose elevator encounter sparked the massacre, is quietly released after charges are dropped because even the prosecutor knows there was no crime, and he leaves Tulsa and disappears into history, and Sarah Page, the elevator operator, also disappears, refuses to testify, never speaks publicly about what happened that day. And the mystery of what actually occurred in that elevator remains unsolved, but in the end it doesn't matter because the elevator was never the real issue. The real issue was that black people in Greenwood had wealth and dignity and success, and white Tulsa couldn't tolerate it. Greenwood, and Oklahoma has apologized, and there are lawsuits seeking reparations for survivors and descendants, but nothing can restore what was lost, not the 300+ lives, not the destroyed wealth, not the generational trauma, not the 80 years of erasure that robbed black Americans of this story, of knowing that their ancestors built something magnificent that white America destroyed not because it was failing but because it was succeeding. 21. Black Wall Street, the wealthiest black neighborhood in America, wakes up to a normal day, doctors seeing patients, lawyers preparing cases, children going to school, businesses opening their doors. 18 hours later, it's gone. Bombed from airplanes. Burned to the ground. 300+ people dead. 10,000 people homeless. And for 80 years, America pretends it never happened. Textbooks don't mention it. Teachers don't teach it. Survivors are told to stay quiet. Because this story asks a question America doesn't want to answer. What do you do when black people succeed? In 1921 Tulsa, the answer was clear. You destroy them. Not because they failed. Because they succeeded. Not because they were dangerous. Because they were prosperous. Not because they started violence. Because they dared to defend themselves when violence came for them. Black Wall Street was bombed because it existed. Because it proved that every racist lie about black inferiority was exactly that, a lie. Because when black people have the same opportunities and resources as white people, they build wealth and communities and futures just like anyone else. And that truth was too dangerous for white supremacy to tolerate. So they burned it down. And then they erased it from history. But you can't erase truth forever. The survivors remembered. The descendants kept asking questions. The mass graves are being excavated. And now you know. Black Wall Street existed. It was magnificent. And America destroyed it.